Ladies and gentlemen, I'm very pleased to have met in Berlin for the 20th Minsk Forum. This is not something that is natural, and that's why self-evident, and this is why I want to express my gratitude to the FES, because in 1995 they gave us 500 Deutschmark, which is roughly today's 400 euros, to realize the first event, Minsk Forum. A lot happened since, and especially the 5 years between 2010 and 2016 that we were not in Minsk after the elections and after the failure of the upheaval. We were twice in Poland and in Vilnius, and I want to dare a hope, and I reported this, we will return to Minsk, but for sure in a country which had free elections, where there are no political prisoners, and where the civic society has regained its power. I have a program from the last forum in 2019 in Minsk, almost 3 years to the day. And back then we had huge hopes for a normalization between Belarus, Europe, Germany. 2 years earlier, the foreign minister of Germany followed our invitation to Minsk, and I think in those years Belarus had become a model country regarding the European neighborship, and we had achieved to bring representatives of the opposition, including the parliamentary opposition, represented by 2 people, to our forum. All this belongs to the past. Today, we are facing a period where the German-Belarusian relations have to be completely re-evaluated. And today we have learned that the German parliament is ready to shape a new format to stay in exchange with the government, with Belarus beyond official channels. The latest developments of mass incarceration, of torture, even of killings, led to the end of the dialogue with the regime. And I know for sure that some people said earlier that the Minsk Forum tries to bridge the gap between the opposition, the regime, and the West. Maybe we were really naive, but I think it was worth the effort to try at least. Today we face a new period in the relations with the Belarusian society, and I think it will be decisive that we don't accept that we don't have state and official relations anymore. I believe that we have to develop new formats that include the whole society, the promotion of culture, of economy, of youth, of the development of the new language, and the exchange of young people. I think the existing partnerships have to be strengthened, and the format of the Minsk Forum has to be massively extended to the European level as an example of a dialogue with the civic society and of the integration of the Belarusian civic society in Europe. I think this is a wish that I can express from the sidelines. I am almost a dinosaur, seeing how many young people are here in the audience, and they will bring the Minsk Forum to the future. And I'm very grateful to the colleagues in our board of directors that you were able to put in place and realize this forum. And this is my second hope, that we may win the neighbors of Belarus, even though a lot is happening there, to enable the dialogue with the people from the Belarusian society who want to visit or even maybe have to flee from their home country. And the most important thing is, in 2020, we saw the emergence of the modern Belarusian nation. And even if not all the population speak the language, and in the case of the big Ukrainian cities where we see a massive predominance of the Ukrainian language, and even if it is not the case in Belarus, I think it is very important for the building of the nation in the country. What makes me worry is a comparison with the early 20th century, looking back 100 years, the birth of the Soviet Union, at a time when the nation and state building of the non-Russian republics was disrupted abruptly, and the attempt to shape their own statehood, the attempt also to provide the nation with a history, with a culture, with a language. The same happened in the Ukraine, by the way, and this was abruptly disrupted. It was the time of civic wars, of integration into a Soviet and Russian-dominated empire. And today, we have returned to a phase or an age that some people would like to call a civic war, not only Europe, in the case of an invasion war of Russia against the Ukraine, and maybe in a similar dimension as 100 years before. And Belarus, especially because of their cultural proximity to Russia and the dominance of their neighbor, is in high risk of losing their independence as a state. And when we speak of a perspective of relation between Europe, Belarus, and Germany until maybe 2030, we have to aim for the sovereignty and independence of this country under all circumstances, including the points that I've mentioned before, but also what was mentioned by Dr. Schmid this morning, that we have to stop seeing the year 2020 as a failure, because it was important that, even in view of the high number of victims and of political prisoners, more than 1,500 political prisoners, many of us have friends, many are partners of the Minsk Forum, but we want to greet all political prisoners. May you be liberated soon. May the Minsk Forum one day be able to return to a free Belarus, and may 2030 be the year when Germany and Europe celebrates having safeguarded the independence and sovereignty, including with financial means. We need much more financial means from the European Union and from Germany than we received in the past for Belarus. So we will be back, but we will be back in a free Belarus. Thanks very much.
So, wir nähern uns.
Well, we are coming to the grand finale. Alina Koushyk from the United Transitional Cabinet, representative for National Revival. So now the focus is on
Dear
Europe.
friends, honorable guests, dear Professor Lindner, I'm so happy to be here tonight with you. Thank you for passionate discussions during the day and attention of the audience for the whole day. It's very symbolic and also tragic for us that Minsk Forum is today in Berlin. Tragic because most of us, we cannot go back home to our relatives, our homes. But symbolic because now we are in the center of Europe. Historically and geographically, Belarus is a part of European cultural space and should remain such in the future. At the same time, for the last 300 years, its territory has been forcibly drawn by Russian Empire and its successors to the orbit of influence of Russian politics and Russian culture. This is the most evident in such areas as national education, language policy, international politics, which are constantly influenced by Russians. In 2020, citizens of Belarus clearly demonstrated their value priorities fully coincide with principles of democratic world. This is upholding of human rights, freedom of speech, assembly, and association, priority of rule of law, and absence of violence in public life. But they were brutally beaten and thrown to prison. For the first time in the last 20 years, in Belarus, according to sociological surveys, the proportion of people who support association with European Union has equaled or even slightly exceed number of those who wish to continue integration with Russia. In this regard, the political and civil cooperation between Belarus and countries of the European Union is a priority agenda for our near future. Dear friends, it's obvious that at the moment Belarusian state is not independent political entity. After falsification of presidential elections, unprecedented violence against citizens, and series of international political scandals, as well as full-scale invasion of Russian Federation against people of Ukraine, the Lukashenko's regime ceased to perform a function of representing interests of Belarusian people. Its existence directly depends on the large-scale financial, political, military, and financial support of Russian Federation, which allows us to consider this regime as a purely puppet one. So what do we have now? Low international legitimacy, subordinate position in military plan, close integration of the special services of two states. These allow us to talk about territory of Belarus in the categories of occupied state. A state where president-elect is forced to live in exile, as well as significant part of the citizens who resist the pressure of the regime. The political significance of the union with the countries of Western Europe today for Belarus means, for the first, to fight against occupation, the restoration of democracy and rule of law, but also struggle for recognition as a legitimate part of European cultural and political space. Dear friends, for centuries, our ancestors lived in the first European confederate powers, Kingdom of Poland and Great Duchy of Lithuania, representing a free union of the people of Poland, Belarus, Ukraine, and Baltic states, which to a certain extent can be considered as a prototype of modern European Union. Close ties and mental closeness are characteristic to those countries, even now. This has become especially evident in the unprecedented amount of support from our Western neighbors to Belarusian people received after events of 2020, and the Ukrainian people are receiving in the current war. This once again demonstrates the importance of further strengthening and of regional ties at the level of Baltic and Black Seas cooperation and building structures of partnership, mutual assistance and security in the region. To further strengthen of the European vector in public consciousness of the people of Belarus, it seems, however, certainly important to develop sphere of national revival. National revival should be understood as return to the society to their basic values and cultural foundations, forcibly destroyed by colonial policy of Russian Empire. Relying in its actions to brute military force as well as submitting the sphere of education and religion through the Orthodox Church of Moscow Patriarchate, Russia for a long time turned its neighboring states into territories of low national consciousness, artificial dominance of Russian language and culture, which today allow us at the level of propaganda to call these territories, Russian world. The very concept of the Russian world, which is used today to justify the aggressive policy of the Kremlin, is based on suppression of any manifestation of national self-consciousness and cultural originality of neighboring people, falling into the zone of influence of Russian state. The scale of national tragedy of Belarusians at the beginning of the 20th century is described in the play by Belarusian writer and poet Janka Kupala Tutejše. In Belarusian language, Tutejše means people who live here. It shows drama of nation devoid of national identity, language, and culture, which does not even have the possibility of self-identification at the grassroots level. But even during Soviet Union, after a short period of rise of national culture, the policy of Russification has carried out quite harshly, especially in urban environment. In 1988, only 22% of Belarusian children had the opportunity to receive school education in Belarusian language. During the years of the rule of dictator Lukashenko, the number of students receiving education in Belarusian language decreased up to 10%, of which only 1% live in the cities. And we still have no higher education in Belarusian language in Belarus. In 2021, the regime liquidated the Belarusian Language Society, the oldest public organization that worked to develop and preserve Belarusian language as national treasure, together with almost 1,000 other non-governmental organizations. The preservation and even strengthening the tendencies towards Russification of cultural and educational evidence is the evidence of truly occupational nature of dictatorship, which holds power using violence. Popularization and widespread of culture and education in national language. Return to unfalsified history. The policy of decommunization and opening the archives of Soviet era. The fight against propaganda of the ideas of the Russian world. And revival of Belarusian language. All this is the main set of actions at the strategy of national revival in Belarus for coming years. Democratic Europe today is an example of struggle of the modern civilization of human rights, solidarity, and tolerance with those countries and regimes that supports violence, xenophobia, and totalitarianism. It's important that the ideas of free development of mankind should not be confined within the narrowly defined space of old Europe and North America, but also include all new countries and continents in its orbit. Belarus is historically and geographically European state. Today, we must find ourselves, our support, and support of developed democracies of Western Europe. We Belarusians see our future together with Europe and associate it with respect for human rights, rule of law, respect for dignity of a person, his freedom of conscience and cultural identity. People of Belarus should have the possibility to make their choice freely. At the same time, we expect that current events will open up before us not only dramatic perspectives of military confrontation and state terror, but also opportunities for a new geopolitical choice and return to European and political, cultural space. And here, we need Europeans to be strong, supportive, and not playing ping-pong with bloody dictator. Now it's a crucial moment in our fight for Belarusian future. Before, Western Europe did not treat seriously Eastern Europe. German public debate showed it. You discussed here in German society that trade with Russia was important to change the country. But you didn't see, before that, Belarus and Ukraine. But we are not a niche. Belarus and Ukraine are part of free Europe. And I have strong belief that we all can go back home. We as Belarusians and Minsk Forum will be held in free Belarus, and I hope it will be soon. Thank you. Живи Беларусь!